Hello and welcome back. Thank you guys for joining us today. Today we got a bit of an interesting topic: how to share the gospel to people and get them to actually listen. So that is the intent behind everything today. So I have a special guest. I'll pull him up in a little bit, but first of all, I have a little spinner here. If you look, there is a goal for the super chat. Every time we get a super chat, I will spin the wheel. Who knows what will happen? Some of the options will be recommendations, things that are going on, and even maybe something change the stream itself. So I will keep that to the side. If we see any super chats, we will hit that at our first convenience. But everyone, say hello to my guest here. Joey, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
So far, so good. Let's go ahead and hit this. So let everyone know who you are and why you're here.
Uh, I'm a philosopher. Like, if I get into why I'm here, it'll take a while. I'm Joey Fukumoto. I'm trying to do cultural apologetics, and in this context, I'm trying to figure out how can we break down a cultural context so we can better understand it, and then have a better idea of what will count as evidence in a conversation. So,
Absolutely. Now, this came out of, I guess, that begs the question why we're doing this. And this came out of a conversation we were having last time on, because you were on my channel a couple weeks ago. We had a conversation after that, which I guess I got some negative feedback, to say the least. And I was very curious, not because I'm upset. How dare you say anything negative at all? No, I'm kidding. Of course, you can say negative things. That's kind of how you grow. Is you're able to take those and take the feedback. And if it's something of value, okay, you might need to correct some things. But it was something that came up last week. Don't need that yet. And I figured, you know what? It'd be good just to have this conversation.
yeah.
Because you made some really good points. So that's what led into this itself. So, you know what? If you don't mind, why don't you share some of the, I guess, negative feedback that was
Man,
based on our last stream?
the way I explained it to you was I gave you context first so that you could make sense of it, right? I went over, well, I guess it started with talking about Andrew Tate, that we started out going, hey, Andrew Tate was popular enough as an influencer that he convinced some people to convert to Islam. So my question there was, why did people consider him to be, uh, why did people listen to him? What questions in culture was he answering that ultimately led to people converting to Islam? And I thought the answer was, over the years, in America, the question of what does it mean to be masculine has changed over like uber machismo, like Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of figure, over to like more musical emo, where we tried to ask this question to figure out what should a man be, and ultimately it kind of ended with this. Well, these are all the problems. Here's Me Too movement. Here's toxic masculinity. If we have all these ideas of what we shouldn't be, what should we be? And the two examples in culture were Jordan Peterson's answer and Andrew Tate's answer. And so ultimately I asked, if we're critiquing Andrew Tate, shouldn't we be critiquing him and giving a counter answer, a Christian answer, because people were converting to Islam over his answer to masculinity? So ultimately my question is, how do we figure out what the reasons that people are converting are? What counts as evidence to that audience so that we can answer those same questions in a superior way? Does that about sum it up, Eric?
I'd say so. And I think you summed it up into three different categories, which were interesting. I have an issue with one of them.
Oh, good.
I have a real hard time with one of them. The other two I can understand. One of them I have a hard time grasping and dealing with, which is fine. But
Yeah.
I think that definitely some of the people that you shared it with that were coming to this channel, were coming with that sort of mindset, how they were thinking about it. And I don't do well with that mindset. I don't appeal very well to it. So I thought that this would be a very constructive thing for everyone to be able to, I guess, learn different mindsets and how, I guess, information is presented and what information is actually valuable.
Yeah, and
My sum up of it.
I think the question that I'm trying to answer when I was working on these categories is, categorically speaking, what counts as evidence? Because I don't know if you've noticed, but when I get into conversations with people, sometimes I'll use some types of arguments and it has no impact, but other people, then they work great. And this is kind of how I broke them out for myself, just so I could have like personal clarity and I can go, oh, this is what's going on, therefore I'll switch to these types of arguments. And again, this is what counts as evidence. And the first one is pre-modern, or as you put it, Eric, it's more like tribal. And this is, again, question: how do I know what counts as evidence, or how do I know what's true? I know it's true because the leader told me, the tribe leader, the head, the authority. In a lot of ways, I think Catholicism is like this. Like, why do I believe this? Because the church said so, because tradition says so, because the Pope says so, from authority, because the authority is what makes the thing true. I also think power operates this way. And to some degree, like mockery and shame work this way. So, like, even with the whole, who is it, Elisha, he's like, where's your God? Why can't he go do this powerful thing? Why? Because it was a power encounter. It's saying whose God is more powerful, not whose God is more true, or whose God internally resolves my emotions, but it's whose God's more powerful. Because ultimately, power is that which determines authority. And I think most of the Old Testament ends up reading that way to me, because like, and that's the language I speak the least. I'm not like I talk to people where they're like, oh, I'm really into Wicca. Can you show me like more magical power? My answer is no, but we can talk through that, because that, like, I'm not an power encounter guy. I can't show them that I'm bigger or I'm stronger. So like, and
See,
that's, yeah, good.
real quick, that's one of the, I'm fine working in that. I'm fine
Why?
working with the authority. I can go to their authorities. I can go to what they appeal to, and I can make the gospel through that. I
Yeah.
don't have an issue with that one.
How do you know? Like, I don't, it's the one I struggle the most with. Like, it's why I
It's
struggle so hard with like Catholicism. I said, okay, what is the authority? Oh, the church. Okay, what specifically? Like, who is the church? Is it the encyclicals? Is it canon law? Is it the councils? Like, what do you do with Vatican II, the pastoral document? Like, even like, is the catechism it? Even so, it seems like I still need an interpreter. So all of those things come down to truth that I cannot access myself, because it's not that which corresponds to reality, and I can't always understand what the authority is. So I can't make an
well,
argument for myself.
that's one of the issues, is being able to define what they actually go to as an authority.
True.
So that would be like, if, for example, with Muslims working with Islam. So what authorities do they appeal to? Well, are they Sunni or are they Shia? Because that changes.
Yeah.
Their authorities change. Okay, so the Quran, they appeal to the Quran. They appeal to Muhammad as being the ideal. Okay, I can work with that. It takes a lot of study. You got to be able to know their sources. You got to be able to go back and forth in it in order to know it. And it kind of works into the second category, even where we're bringing up evidence that is, this is the sources. This is what it says. This is what your authoritative sources say is X, Y, Z. And then from there, I can build off of that. For example, the Islamic dilemma, saying, okay, this here, the Quran tells me as a Christian, I am supposed to go judge by the gospel. I pull up the gospel as an authority because that's what the Quran tells me, and they're appealing to the Quran as their authority. I go to here and I find, oh, shoot, this here tells me that this one is corrupt. So this authority says this is good. I go to this. This one specifically tells me this is bad, such as the Islamic dilemma. So
I like
that would be how that's David Wood's
yeah, but
main thing. And go ahead.
what you're doing makes sense to me. So you're comparing authorities. Why? Because authorities are that which counts as evidence, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
and some of your other stuff now makes more sense to me. You're saying, oh, if somebody here says this, but the Quran here says that. So, like, I'm not making a claim. I'm saying your two authorities conflict. How do you make sense of that? Right? So you're taking the
Yes.
evidence that they consider, that which they consider evidence, seriously, and you're showing that there are problems with it. And so,
Now,
like,
if they want to go,
no, go ahead.
some of them will just say, you know what, I only take some of the hadith. I cherry pick what I want from the hadith. I really rely on this only. In that case, I would disregard most of the hadith and just focus on what they're saying their foundation is. In the same way, if a Christian tells me that this is their foundation, that's where I would go to. I wouldn't start saying, well, this church father over here said XYZ and the Pope said XYZ after that. And it's like, but I say that I only go to this as my authority. Then that doesn't work. If you're dealing with Catholicism, you need to find out if they accept all the rules of the church, if they discard some of one of the Vatican rulings or not. I've had Catholics discard sections and not. What is authority? And then the follow-up question I have for that is, by what authority are you discarding those? Why are you discarding them? Is it
Yeah,
just
why
because
that
you want
question?
to?
Yeah, why that question? That makes sense to me. Why though? Why? What? By what authority?
Yeah, by what authority are you doing? Because if you're saying that this is your authority, for example, with Muslims, this is your absolute authority is the Quran. But then you're like, well, I don't really like Quran 929. I just don't like that one. So it's not authoritative. Okay, why are you saying it's not authoritative? Is it just because of how you feel about it? How it makes you feel? Then your feelings are what is authoritative.
Yep.
And then I think that goes into another category that we'll hit later on.
Yeah, and so my question here, so I can understand better, because already this is helping me understand uh, pre-modern apologetics better. So, what questions do you ask normally in order to figure out what people's authorities are? Because once you have that filled out, then you know what counts as evidence. And then anything that they don't consider authorities, that doesn't count as evidence. So, I'm playing on this playground. I'm not playing anywhere else, right? Because then you're not like, oh, well, in the Bhagavad Gita it says this, Baha'i says this. Okay, these are authorities, but these are not their authorities, or even some of the
Yeah,
hadith,
they discard those. Yep.
right? And so, so from my understanding, what questions would you ask in order to figure out what is authoritative to somebody who's Muslim?
So in general, again, it counts on what sect they are, but in general, most Muslims, so like I think 95% of them are Sunni, so they accept the hadith that are out there. Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, as well as the others. They accept those as authority as long as it's Sahih. They'll accept it, and then they accept the Quran. Okay, well, then that's a starting point. We can then move from that point into actually investigating. If they're Sunni, I'm not as familiar with the hadith that the Sunni accept. And there are Muslims that will say, oh, I'm Quran only. I only believe in this Quran. In that case, I normally try to show them that that's not actually true, that they do take hadith over the Quran and walk them through that process.
Yeah, all that. This is funny because all of this makes way more sense to me, because you're taking what they consider as truth and you're showing where they conflict, or what the outcome of like this idea of truth is. No, wait, with this idea, no, you have to include this. This is necessary given the implications of this authority, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you have to
So if
include
they,
these hadiths. You can't, according to your own authorities or scripture.
for example, if I have a Sunni Muslim who comes up here to talk to me, and they say, you know what, you can't worship any other than Allah. Allah is the only one you can worship. Well, I know that the hadith classify prayer as worship. So then I can go to other hadith that are considered reliable, that talk about Muhammad ordering prayer, and say, hey, I know you say that these are authoritative. I know you believe in the ruling of the Muslim authorities and the Muslim scholars. Why then do you tell me that you can only worship Allah when I see here Muhammad commanding worship of himself by your standard? And then go from there. So obvious contradictions like that help bring question, bring clarity to lies that they have been brought in, false evidence, such as the scientific miracles claim in the Quran, and you actually look at it, it's like, oh no, this is a bunch of garbage. The Quran itself is not even making that claim. These are just verses taken out of context in order to match this. But you can go to there and say, like Ali Dawa not too long ago said that they're all debunked, but it was the main reason he converted to Islam to begin with was because of scientific miracles. And it's like, okay, well, if that's true, if that pillar is now gone and you realize that you were brought in through a lie, how much else is a lie? So that would be how to deal with authority. You got to know what their authority is and what it says. I guess would be the main thing. So personal study into it.
Oh, okay. So then, do you think that Christianity is at core pre-modern?
It encourages the concept of the modern, which we'll go into in the actual scripture. It has aspects of both. Pre-modern in that the Bible is authoritative, that is the inspired word of God, but at the same time, this encourages people to investigate, people to ask questions, people to look at the evidence, look and start searching. Where specifically Quran 5:101 says, if it were to cause you to doubt, don't ask the question. So if you have a question and it would cause you distress, don't ask. Don't ask.
Right. In light of our last conversation, that makes more sense to me because the goal is submission. It's not truth. And so if you doubt, that could impact your submission, right?
And that's what a lot of Muslims will claim. Well, in fact, it even says it in here. There's a hadith that says you don't just say that you believe, say that you submit. So the concept in Islam is, yes, you are to submit without question. Christianity, it says, hey, this is what God has given you. This gives you moral guidance, which this gives you moral rules according to itself. And the hadith give it moral rules. This one gives you moral guidance in order to make the correct judgments yourself, but also encourages you to ask questions and to meditate on it. So dwell upon it and think it through. So I think that's where it gets into the modern realm.
Yeah.
So since we've already been using this term modern, why don't you give the breakdown of it?
Yeah.
Actually, give the breakdown. I will be right back. I got to take care of something real quick.
Okay. So for modern, again, we're in the context of what counts as evidence. So if people and like the different tribes come together with pre-modern and say, no, we're right, no, we're right, and you just have two authorities that are saying that they're right, like this is how I envision the change happening. Like the authority might not answer itself. And so eventually we moved on to modern, which was looking for systems of evidence that are external to the person. I would say mathematics, science, even like some of the governmental systems, the education system as a whole, like systematic history, that ends up being modern. And if you want to go back a bit, like a lot of this comes out of Descartes' work and ultimately the Enlightenment, where it was no longer that man knows because he was told so or he had a tradition passed on. Man knows because there are external rules and reasons that he can use to come to conclusions about truth, because truth is that which corresponds to reality, not that which corresponds to authority. And so I think part of what Eric was saying here was that the Bible also makes the claim that it corresponds to reality, that hey, when we talk about Jesus existing, he actually existed. This isn't something, a story that you need to submit to. This is a story that corresponds to actual history. So is that a good way of putting it there, Eric?
It's something that can be tested. It's something that can be tried over and over. God does say, test me on this, test
Yeah.
me on this, test me on this. So he's not just saying you have to follow me because I am the only authority. It's saying, no, you can test me, you can inquire, you can ask questions. We see this definitely with even some of the judges, where it says, Gideon, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if this is actually what's going on here. If this is really you, Lord, testing, and he puts him through a test to say, hey, do this. If you are real, do this. So there's a testing, there's the inquiry. That's something you do not have in Islam. It's all authoritative. And this can even go through different government structures, where you have certain government structures, authority based. You do not question the leader. The Führer is doing what he needs to do, and you do not question the Führer. Those sort of top down orders definitely lend themselves to the authoritative base argument, the pre-modern concept that we were talking about. Now you're talking about the modern concept, where it's like, okay, give me the evidence.
Yeah,
Let me see the evidence.
Yeah. The evidence exists outside of authorities. So it's not like this person said so. It's here's a scientific method, here's the conclusion, and theoretically I could test it also. Same with mathematics or any other, I want to say evidential system, because like sometimes pre-modern sounds like it can be modern insofar as it's getting external evidence, but most of the time the evidence is an authority, or it's the words of an authority. And so you can make arguments out of there, but a lot of times they're less systematic. So I would say like, and the argument for the universe's expansion would be systematic. There are a whole bunch of different mathematical, scientific theories and models that come together in order to be able to show that this comes together, because it's a model. It's not an authority. It's not a power move. So, and you know where I could go with this, but I won't. So that's
Yes.
modern. Yeah, and you said you thought that Christianity was also modern, right?
It's a mixture, because you have the authority, but then you have the offer saying, hey, here's the evidence. Because, for example, it makes a claim in history that Jesus died. We can check that outside of Christianity, outside independent sources. And that's what convinced me more than anything else is, oh, look, I can look outside of the Bible. I can look outside of Christians, something completely independent from Christianity. And I say, okay, these historical events that it is talking about in the book line up. And even when I was in college, it was a secular college, a secular class, Humanities 101, used the Bible because it lined up with history perfectly.
Yeah.
And I even got in debates with my professor in that, saying, hey, if you're saying all these they've recorded all this history correctly, perfectly, there's no issue with it, we'll take it as authority, and you need so much so that you need to study it in order to get a passing grade on here. But we're just going to take out all the theological stuff, all the God stuff. That couldn't have possibly happened. I'm like, by what authority? Because it seems like you're using them as an authority, saying, hey, you need to study this, but just ignore everything else, because the people who are reliable enough to write down what historically happened weren't reliable whenever it came to anything that I can explain.
But didn't you just move from modern to pre-modern? Because
Yes.
you moved from evidence to authority? Okay.
Yes. It's flow. I would say modern and pre-modern in that concept are very close together once you actually start looking at it, because it's going to be based off of something to move back and forth throughout it. For example, if a professor tells you, go study this book, you need to go study the science book. Is that an appeal to an authority? In some way, because it's saying that that book is authoritative enough to be able to teach you about this subject. But at the same time, there's also things in there you can test, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
So that would be a mixture between both pre and modern concepts that we're putting out here.
Yeah. Because you're saying truth is that which corresponds to authority, but truth is that which corresponds to reality. maybe in a way that overlap, or maybe they have different magisterium.
Yes.
And so,
So they
or
can
maybe
be
it's
very
something more.
close.
Oh, because I don't like. I would say in Christianity you might be right, but as a whole, I would say you would. I don't think I would agree, because I would say is Islam modern, pre-modern, and modern? Why or why not?
I would say pre-modern only
Okay,
because it's all authoritative base. In fact, that's one of the main teachings is you just submit to whatever is said. You submit to whatever Muhammad's rulings were. It's all authoritative based, and it doesn't give you anything really to test. Even if you just look at it from the outside and say, you know what, I'm going to test it just on the claims it makes as far as scientifically, as far as like history goes. Okay, so it claims some things happened in history. Let's see if those. Okay, well, this really doesn't. It's the hadith that do. And the hadith are written 200 years after the event itself. So that leads into a bit of an issue with that. So you can't really thoroughly test it because we don't see any historical evidence of Muhammad during the time span that he's supposed to be. So you can't really test it outside. What you end up with is silence, and you can try to make the argument that, well, there's just no evidence here that he existed. In fact, there's evidence that would kind of point against him existing, kind of. If we look at it really hard. So either he didn't exist or he's not as big of a character as Muslims claim he was. I don't really use that too much. I know Jay Smith does a lot of that, but because Muslims are pre-modern most of the time, it really doesn't impact them. It would
okay.
impact me if I was studying Islam. I would look at that and say, whoa, Muhammad's supposed to be this big warlord who's supposed to reset this entire region. Why don't we see everyone writing about him? Everyone should be talking about him. He's supposed to be like the biggest thing that's happened in like forever there. Outside of Muslim sources, not really there.
And
You have
so
to go with Muslim sources, and those are not impartial.
so because Islam is only pre-modern, that means that all pre-modern stuff doesn't necessarily tie closely to modern. That external evidence and authority don't always line up for
Okay, I
either
think I
one
might.
or for Christianity.
I stand corrected. If you thought that I was saying that it's always the same, no, there's a lot that can cross back and forth because if you go to like science books, you're still taking that as an authority that it knows what it's talking about. You're not going through your science book and testing out each thing it claims to say in order to make sure that it is actually correct. There are things that you can do to test. There are science experiments that says, hey, this will line up with what we say here, which is absolutely true. And I agree on doing it. But there's still the authoritative aspect of taking it as an authority. And you do have that in Christianity. Again, you do have things that are specifically pre-modern, absolutely. And I'd say Islam falls under that pre-modern aspect, as well as most paganism in general fall under that.
Why? I agree with paganism, but why?
I'm talking about the pagan religions such as the Greek pagan concepts, the Norse pagan concepts, the pantheon they have there. Again, that came all down due to definitely in talking about in the Norse, those were all stories told down by the storytellers that they would have around the campfire. They'd have a specific role. That was their job and that was their authority. They were the authority on this, and it was not to be questioned. What they said, if they said that the sound of thunder was because Thor struck his hammer on the ground, okay, then that's the authority, right? That's what they're saying. Those are the tales that they spin around the campfire late at night. You would have priestesses and priests in the Greek concepts. That would be the authoritative. You have oracles that they would go to. That would be the authoritative one. And you're not to test it. You're just to go with the will of the gods in this. And
Yeah,
you can
'cause it's all about,
sacrifice and you can try to sway it, but you have to go with whatever that God decided.
yeah, so it's still about power and authority there. Like which
Yes,
gods have the power and authority. And so,
which would be pre, right?
yep, yep,
Okay, that's
pre-modern
what
Roman.
I thought. That's what I said was
Yeah.
pre-modern.
Oh yeah, no, that
Yeah.
you, because you're explaining the pagan religions. Yeah, I agree. I have some caveats on that, like because I would say most people that believe in pagan religions today are postmodern. But that
Well,
would be my point.
that would be what nowadays is, which I would almost say is it's a different can of worms compared to the other one. There's not
Yeah.
really comparison between the two because one is built off of tribal concepts. A lot of them were built only this set group was what the gods ruled over. In fact, it's one of the reasons why whenever the Israelites went through to get to the promised lands, and basically the pagans around them are seeing God do miracles as they're moving into these other dwellings, which they're supposed to be the realms of each god. Each god has their own little boundaries, their own little areas of ruling. And here's this God who can do all things, just plowing through all the pagan deities.
Yeah,
So,
because
yes,
that's a good pre-modern apologetic, right? Because the question is who has which god is the most authority? Oh, the one that can overpower the other gods. Which is why I don't think I'm very good at pre-modern apologetics. I'm not showing off that my magic is better than other people's magic, or that I can show better miracles, you know.
well,
Because I've had,
that was just the concept that was there during that time period. I was just
yeah,
using that as an example of showing their mindset. Now, if you're talking about modern day paganism, that's another. They're based on a different concept than what the I guess pre. What do you call them? Just like the old pagans, I guess.
yeah. I think the question here is still what counts as evidence. I would say pagans believe in these things for different reasons, and so just like you could have pre-modern Christians or modern Christians or both, depending upon their cultural context, they might be one or the other. Because I would even say we can probably have postmodern Christians.
So, okay. So we talked about pre, we talked about modern, and those are the ones that I deal best in. So now we can get to the weak suit. So we can get to my weak card here, which is post, which I have the worst time with. So could you explain
Yeah,
what what the concept is of postmodern?
yeah,
And this is
yeah,
what I mean. I struggled with, just let the audience know. I struggled with this for hours and hours and hours. The next day, I was still mulling over this. Joey knows because I text him every now and again and still say, I'm still dealing with this.
yeah.
I'm still doing it because it's just the concept that he's going to show here is so alien to my understanding of the world
Mhm.
that I have a hard time grasping it. Now, just real quick, I do want to remind you guys, if you send in any super chats, we do have the prize wheel that we will be spinning and seeing what you get. There are some things that could actually even change the stream, how it's formatted, and how it goes from this point on. It could affect it the entire time. So if you want to try that, go ahead and send in a super chat and we'll do the wheel. But until then, let's go ahead and talk about postmodern.
Yeah,
What is
and
that?
per postmodernism, I'm going to explain this in like a story format. So if pre-modern, you have like a tribe, and you're like, okay, what do I do? Okay, I should listen to the tribe leader or the shaman, you know, or sometimes they're the same. Okay, easy answer. What do you do when there's 50 tribes? Like, you just go to war every time in order to figure out who's right or what to do? Like, at some point, that's impractical. Like, at some point, like I think they went, okay, we have to figure out something outside of our authority systems in order to determine what's true. Then we have modernism, like superseding uh, the tribal pre-modern approach, because there needed to be something that is external to the tribe, external to authority, to begin to answer questions. The problem with modernism was it was very focused on the structure. It was very focused on like the mathematical system and how everything went together. And like it was so mathematically perfect. It was like the old Star Trek. There was no room for people. Like there's no room for your feelings. There's no room for your experience. There's only room for cold hard facts. Like the whole idea of postmodernism, which makes sense to me. Oh, okay. So who here has been to one of those hospitals where you go in, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm in a freaking prison. Like the design there architecturally is modern. It is meant to be as efficient as possible, not as human as possible. So like people would get depressed in modern facilities. Like postmodern facilities were built for your experience, for beauty's sake. Like beauty is not something that is considered all that important. Like truth is considered important, but not beauty, not desire, not story. Ultimately, and I think Nietzsche ends up pointing this out, among other people, there is no meaning in modernism. You are a cog in a machine. You don't matter. Like you might not even have free will. And like it's really hard to live in that. Essentially that's kind of Nietzsche's God is dead world. You like all like what do you do with this? You have this world without meaning. That's part of why Peterson, I think, is postmodern. What is he doing? He's going, what, from my subjective standpoint, what can I know? If I don't know authorities to be true, if I don't know scientific structures to be true, like we as American culture don't generally trust science. That's why we have the gender identity questions. Like what do we trust? The one thing we know is we know our own experience. We know how we feel. Like think about after the development of the internet. It's not that you have too little information, it's that you have too much. How do you know? Like eventually people get information overload and they go, I'm going to go with my gut on this one. Like I'll give, my dad is like the biggest modern ever. So anytime he cooks something, he's like, okay, here are my 17 criteria to make one recipe. It has to have this many reviews, it has to have this many stars on allrecipes.com, and it's very, very, very precise. And he's like, and it has to have these kinds of measurements. I'm like, okay, that's very modern of you. That's how he makes decisions as to how he makes what meals to get. Like me, I'm just like, I feel like a cheeseburger. I don't go do a bunch of research to figure that out. And I think that that's basically how postmodern culture begins to answer these questions. And so like because how we feel is something that we know. Because again, it's answering the question, how do we know? Like one of my close friends, when we first started arguing, he's a Christian apologist, well known, very good at philosophy. I would make arguments with him and he'd go, doesn't something just feel off about that? Why? Because it didn't resonate with him. Because he was so postmodern that my reasons did not matter. If it did not feel right to him, it was not right. And I'm curious what you guys in the comments think, especially Eric, because if you're doing Ratio Christi, you interact with people on campus. You interact with people on campus, I think they're far more likely to fall into the postmodern category.
So real quick here, and this is the poll that's going on right now that I have you guys. Which of the following is the most important thing to you in a discussion? The options are how it makes me feel, the evidence given, and the third one is if it is from an authority. So those are really the three categories that we're talking about. So we're now into how it makes you feel. And it really is a feeling driven concept that it's true because I feel that it's true. My problems with that, again, I have a hard time with it because of how I was raised. It was very fact-based. How I was raised was that the Bible was the authority and I can test it. I can then take what it says and then go through and check it. That's how I was raised. Those were the concepts that I was given growing up. The feelings really didn't matter into it. Not that feelings are invaluable at all. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that feelings are invaluable. I'm not saying that at all. Just that feelings are deceptive. They are fleeting. They change. And I just lost my balloons. They were part of the pop balloon, the balloon pop that's on the list. I lost one of them. Oh, too. It made me feel very bad when it fell on my head, just to let you know. So there's my argument for that. As to the argument for modern, it's on the ground right now. That's my evidence. And I'm telling you, as an authority, it's on the ground right now. So there, we just hit all three of them. So
I would argue that meaning and purpose
go ahead.
primarily exists in postmodern, because modern can't give you that answer. I cannot look at history and go, oh, therefore, this is what is meaningful. I think it's part of the problem with evolutionary theory. Ultimately, it can't answer that question.
And I would rely on posts for that because I've already tested something. It has been found to be true on some aspects because I can only test some aspects of it. I can't test all aspects, right? So the aspects I've tested on the Bible, it's come out 100% of the time as true. Therefore, I take it as an authority that it can then be an authority on the other aspects that can't really necessarily test. I haven't seen heaven in this regard. I had vision when I was a kid, but that's a story for another time. But that would still be in line with what I have read and seen in the scripture. So I would take that as an authority that there is that the heaven is there, that is what happens afterwards. I can't test what happens after my death because that's a one-way street. That's like a one-way doorway. I can't come back from that. I can't go, peek around the corner and come back. I can't do that.
That's not what people with near-death experiences say.
Well, near-death experience, I'm not lining up for a near-death experience, okay? I'm saying me personally do the testing, right? Because
okay,
even if I rely on someone else to do the testing, I'm taking them as an authority then, right?
I think it depends if you take them at their word or if you're looking at the evidence that they provide and you can test it for yourself.
Well, the problem is with the evidence that they provide, if they have a near-death experience, I have to take them at their word because, again, the only way for me to test that is to have a near-death experience personally.
Yeah.
Which then would make me feel very bad, just FYI.
So let's take a step back here. So for modern, how would you compare two modern systems to each other? Or can you give me two modern systems? You can take the modern part of Christianity and what else can argue through historical, scientific, like
probably science itself would probably argue that it could stand up there. Now, some of the testing there, I definitely question on the results, but it would definitely step up to that saying, hey, it's reliable. I would say democracy is something that has stood the test of just being able to survive for as long as it has.
because I would say atheism. Atheism is foundationally modern for the most part. It's people wanting to argue about science, history.
I'd say old atheism is.
Yes, exactly. Old atheism is. Because new atheism is
new atheism, which I'd say is mostly post.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you have Christianity, how would you show, because we're kind of talking about the context, given the context, how do you, what counts as evidence? Or ultimately the question is, how do you give the gospel given those contexts? So for modernism against atheism, modern atheism, what would count as evidence? How would you do it?
Be the historical reliability. It would be what is actually said there, stepping through the lives of the disciples, showing that, well, first of all, if you're founding a religion, if you're all trying to all make this up, the thing you would definitely not do is have your chief guy, who's supposed to be Peter, who's founding, after Jesus' death, is supposed to be founding this religion, deny Jesus right off the bat. Absolutely say he's false, and then go into hiding and hide. You definitely wouldn't say that. Definitely if you're trying to spread a religion that is most likely going to lead you to death. And say, well, I ran away and hid in the back room and locked the door. So you definitely wouldn't put your founding apologists into that category. But we know that Christianity did spread, that they did go to their deaths. We know that through historical writings outside of Christianity itself. Again, looking at pagan writings, looking at what the Greeks were writing, what different Jewish historians were writing, those would be where I would go in that case, saying, hey, the evidence seems to be pretty solid that this is reliable. And if, for example, if you got a science book, like I said earlier, you're not going to test everything in the science book. You're going to test what you can test. And in that case, this tells you, go ahead and test me. In fact, you could even make the argument that that science book is based off of this, that without the Bible, you wouldn't have science itself. We saw the founders of modern science were Christian, that were all looking to explore and understand God's world better. And in so doing, come to a deeper understanding of God himself.
Oh, okay, then here's a funny question. If there are atheists asking questions in a modern way, what ways are not good ways in which to communicate with them? Like I would say pre-modern, right?
So, okay, so you're saying pre-modern, saying, okay, this here is an authority and this is what I'm taking as authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would not work for a modern atheist, because they just look at this, say it's just a book. It's not useful. Now,
So here's
you
the
can argue that this is, like I said before, if you can argue that this has said things that are very reliable and it definitely seems to be coming out as true all the time, maybe we should look at the other sides of it, even though it makes claims that aren't really easily tested. Those might be interesting to look at because it was right about everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to just say, okay, this is authority, this is what it says, therefore you have to believe it, that's not going to work.
Okay, yeah. And so what arguments of Christianities are pre-modern and therefore are not useful against modern atheists? I mean,
I'd say
you know kind of where I want to go with that, but
I'm not sure if I do know where you're trying to
okay.
go with that, because again, my argument would be the absolute authoritative authority of the Bible. It says it, therefore it is. Without the ability to test it or to check it,
Right.
that would be the issue.
Yeah.
If you're just coming from that standpoint.
Because I don't tend to think prophecy, fulfilled prophecy, is that useful for atheists, modern atheists.
If you
Because
could
it's not,
prove, the
yeah.
only thing that I think that I would work for is if you could prove that it was written beforehand and it was
Yep,
very
I agree
specific.
there.
For example, the Dead Sea Scrolls are extremely good in this because it contains a very clear description of the Messiah coming that fits Jesus like a glove. That would be good argument. But then again, that's relying on evidence. But prophecy on itself, without testing it, it's an old book. They can easily make the claim. I know many atheists do that. It's just like, okay, they just rewrote it. They saw what Jesus did and said, okay, the Messiah has to come from Bethlehem because Jesus came from Bethlehem. They could easily make that argument without understanding the context of what's actually written there and that it existed beforehand and how long beforehand it existed. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, and so like, what? And I know you'll love this question. Can you name two belief systems that are postmodern, and then how do you have a conversation there?
postmodern.
Yeah.
So postmodern, I would probably, of course, I'd say new atheism would be postmodern.
Who is a new atheist?
Someone who relies on how they feel. I'd definitely say the LGBTQ community would fall into this.
Oh, why do you put them
Anyone
under
that's
new
just
atheists? I only put Sam Harris under new atheists. Like how do you define new atheists?
someone that would be using the postmodern
Oh,
arguments. Because if
why?
you're using modern arguments, if you're actually looking at the evidence,
Yeah.
They used to say, it used to be a common statement from atheists like 30 years ago. Prove it. Prove it, prove it, prove it. Prove it. You say something from the Bible because you're saying that this is true from the Bible. Prove it. Prove it. You don't hear atheists saying that anymore. You hear atheists saying that's not how it makes me feel. I don't feel that that's true. It's not. It's more feelings based, which would put it in post.
Yeah, but on that, I would say I don't consider those people atheists. Like I consider most people postmodern in American culture, but I think that most of them believe in a higher power or spirituality. Like one of my friends just shared a conversation she had, which was pretty interesting. This guy came up to her and he's like, "Oh, you're a Christian?" Like, well, I'm the opposite of that. She's like, "Oh, a Satanist? Satanist?" He's like, "No." "Oh, so an atheist?" And he's like, "No, I'm actually a theist." Yeah, I think most people believe in a higher power. I think most postmoderns feel that there is something greater than them out there, and that they are open to the idea of God. Because I think very few people in American culture are atheists now. We have some agnostics, but the only people that tend to be atheists are moderns, which I think are not the cultural norm anymore.
Okay, I would say someone who is claiming to be atheist who does it based upon feelings. That's what I would classify as a new atheist. The old atheists I can deal with. The new atheists I have a bit of an issue with.
Why? Like so if for pre-moderns you're doing, here's your authority, like first you do it's okay, here's your authority. What does it match up with the in do all of your authorities match up? And if it's no, then you show that there is a conflict, and then you start showing how to resolve it. Eventually you say, here is your authority with the problems, here's the authority of the Bible, and this is why it solves those problems. And so you're comparing apples to apples. It's the same thing with modernism. His here's like this historical study. Okay, here's what Christianity says. Here's a scientific. Here's Christianity. We can both build systems and compare. Oh, here are the
Yes.
problems with atheism. And so for postmodernism, why would it be any different?
Post is it's all feelings based. It's personal experience. I
It's
can't line up my personal experience perfectly with yours.
no,
I
you don't.
can take,
Sure, but
I
what's the
can,
first
sorry,
thing?
real quick.
Yeah,
I can take let's say a science experiment. If I mix chemicals together, I expect to get the same result. And then if you mix chemicals together, you
yeah,
get the same result. The problem is with personal experience, each personal experience is different. I cannot line it up. If two people even experience the same day together, and then we're asked afterwards to tell them what mattered most to them or the top 20 things that mattered to them the most, there's a good chance that maybe one, maybe two of those things might line up, but that's about it.
sure.
And there's even a better chance that some of those might not even have clicked for each individual person.
Yeah,
So I can't do the same testing techniques. I can't apply the same sort of style because each individual person is so different from each other.
yeah. And something that you said there make really like pointed out, because they have like different priorities and they notice different things, right? Like so like they have the same experiences throughout the day, but they both like recognize different things because they're focused, or they have different priorities or values. So what then would be a translation tool?
Got it. The Gospels,
What, how? So for
because
postmodern,
they're each of them for post, each of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are written. Well, Matthew, Mark, and John are written from firsthand perspective. They are their stories. They
yeah,
are what their experiences are
yeah,
of this.
yeah,
And they're giving you their experience, and they don't line up all the time because
right,
they fill in the blanks. Because again, like I just used with the day analogy, some things stuck with one person and then stick with another person. But you put all those stories together, and it doesn't mean that one of them was invalid. They were all valid. But when put together, you get a much better picture. In the same argument, you could then use that to say, well, if you were hypothetically an all-powerful God, We wanted to make sure that people would remember what actually occurred here during your time on Earth. You would want to get multiple perspectives in order to be able to tell their own experiences in order to relay that to other people.
Yeah,
And you'd want to make sure that you interlock those together in one consistent element.
yeah, and on that, I would say one of my close friends who started out postmodern, that was very important to him because he could see the people, the different disciples' authentic experience and how they differed. Like, but because, like you said, two people can have the same experience and have radically different outcomes, and you have a problem with that, right? Do you have a problem with the Gospels?
I don't have a problem with that. What I have a difficulty with, I should say, it's
Uh-huh.
not really a problem. I don't like say, "Oh, your day was invalid because it didn't line up with mine." No, that's
Of course, why don't
stupid.
you?
That
No,
would be
but why? Yeah,
stupid for
but why is
someone to
that
say.
stupid? Essentially, that's what
Because it
moderns
doesn't
say.
always
If you're
it
modern,
doesn't
that's what
in
you say. Like you're like, okay, this is how the day happened. Well, this was my perspective on it. No, there are no perspectives. There is only truth. Truth is the raw facts. Like how you perceive it does not matter.
I don't necessarily have all the data points.
Oh,
I only
okay.
have the data points I was able to observe. The data points you observed are different than the data points that I would have observed.
Yeah.
So we would need to mesh them together in order to get a full picture of what actually happened. Now, that's actually what detectives do. A lot of times they'll interview a bunch of different witnesses, take all their statements, combine them together in order to try to get a much better picture of what is going on. Now,
Oh,
I
man.
need to interrupt here for a real quick. There's a question here, and he's probably not the only one because others might have joined us later on. He says he wants to know your stance as far as like theology. You know what, guys, this whole conversation came out of a discussion that Joey and I had based upon our last live stream together, which he pointed out some interesting perspectives that I've never seen before. So I figured that it would be good if we start doing like a just a phone call on it, going back and forth. And I was thinking back in my mind, I can't be the only one to benefit from
Yeah.
this. So we definitely, if you guys could benefit from this and be able to spread the gospel better based upon what our discussion is, we should make it available to everyone
Yeah.
so they can see it. Now, that being said, Joey, mind giving a rundown real quick, another introduction of yourself just for the people who
Sure.
are joining us late?
Yeah. My name's Joey. I've had a lot of friends that have had a lot of questions and mostly postmodern questions. And my modern apologetics, like quoting Geisler or William Lane Craig, going over scientific, historical. Like I can argue the Kalam with you. I can go over actual infinites, but those aren't the questions that people are asking. They ask me all of these, what I would call postmodern or post-Christian questions, and I really struggled to answer them because I found that for the most part, Christian apologetics doesn't handle these questions. Like, oh, these are subjective. We only care about objective truth. And I went, why? Like our goal as Christians, our goal as apologists is to answer the questions that people have that so that they can get to the point where they understand the gospel, so that they might hear and they might know that they might believe. But a lot of times, like we won't even start the conversation because their questions are subjective. So a lot of what I've tried to do is like figure out how do we understand where other people are coming from? How do we know what counts as evidence for them and what they value? Because a combination of these things will let us know what gets us in the way of the points of the gospel. Like if they're a pre-modern, why don't they believe in God? Are they modern? Why don't they believe in God? If they're postmodern, why don't they believe in God? And then you can go the same with sin. You know, man is sinful. Like what Jesus died for our sins. You can go through these points that pull the premises that you can pull together with the conclusion of the gospel. And you can go from these perspectives, where is the miscommunication occurring? And then how can I close the gap there? We're just spending a lot of time right now on pre-modern, modern, and postmodern, the general different areas as to what people can count as evidence, specifically towards belief. Is that did I pass?
That's a great rundown there. Now, real quick, couple of house cleaning things I need to take care of. Mods in the live chat, do remember that on this channel, I allow anyone to speak in the live chat itself. Please don't, put anyone in timeout for just having opinions, even if they're anti-Christian, they're more than welcome to do it. The only things I'd say timeout worthy would be if they're either spamming just the same thing over and over and over again because they're not really looking for a conversation, they're just spamming, or if they are actively threatening someone in either a vague way or directly, then timeout. And if you think someone needs to be banned, at me, let me know about it, and I will take care of that myself. So just house cleaning. And then yes, for the super chats, I am now doing something cool for the super chats, which is the prize wheel, which are things that might even affect, could be small, could be, the goat screaming, that one's on there. It could be something as big as actually changing something about the backdrop or something about me that can affect the rest of the live stream. So that being said, let's go ahead, and we had one other request, which is just give a snippet on what postmodern means.
Yeah, and I would say I start out by defining it as a rejection of modernism. It's saying that modernism basically claimed that all of our problems would be solved if we just knew more systematically. Like most of the political philosophies were that way. Everyone from like Locke, Hegel, Hume, Marx, they all said if we had the right governmental system, then man will be like perfected. The whole idea of utopia comes from a modern idea. And so modernism thought if we had enough science, facts, whatever else, we could perfect humanity and then everything would be perfect. It had this idea that we are just going to keep progressively learning and getting better in a secular humanist sort of way. And postmodernism is where we go, oh, we don't think that we're going to have Star Trek here. We think that we're progressively getting worse. We're going to have the zombie apocalypse. I think that that's why we have all of this dystopian sci-fi going on, because it's our postmodern wrestling with the fact that we thought that science would save us. What do we do now that it's not going to? It's also why I think atheism, modern atheism, is mostly irrelevant. People are like, I tried this and it's not fulfilling. It did not answer my core questions, because my core questions are about why am I valuable? Like what makes humans important? Is love really a thing? Like modern science can't answer that. Modernism on its own can't answer that. It can't answer why is life hard? Why do we suffer? Is there meaning in the world? Can we know it? Why do so many people have depression? A lot of these emotionally wrestling with questions. Why is there abuse? Why is there trauma? How do I deal with it? These are postmodern questions. There are questions about how do I make sense of my own experience or narrative? Does that answer the question sufficiently?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. We also had a point out here from Eric saying, I think we should ask non-Christians directly, what is the main thing that keeps you from trusting in Christ? That is, it's a great question. It's a great question to start off from, because then you can understand even which one of these three categories to kind of fall into. It's a personal issues that they've had in the past that they've been struggling with, that maybe they were mistreated by a church and they've got church hurt and went to another and just absolutely abandoned it. I definitely say that's probably more post, in my opinion.
100% right. The institution of the church hurt me. How do I make sense of my experience? It's not asking if the church is true. That's why I think a lot of our conversations with Christians that are deconstructing or becoming progressive, we're asking them the wrong questions, because they're saying, why do I have this pain here?
And that being able to hit that, if I went to that and said, well, there's historical evidence that the Bible is correct, that's going to mean nothing to them. Or if I come to them and say, well, everyone goes through hard times, sometimes it's just God testing us. If that's their perspective, that's not going to mean very much to them.
What do they hear then? What do you think
God's fault? God's the one who did it to you. And that's not going to help. Now, if you go to them, say, you know what? Humans are screwed up.
Yes.
It's messed up.
Yeah.
We all fall short of the glory of God. That's why we are not to emulate any one individual above everyone else. We are to look towards Christ, which never failed, who never fell short. We are to be like him. And let me help you try to understand that better. what that
Yeah.
actually means for you in your life.
Yeah. I mean, like I ended up in a cult group and I dropped out of college. It was a Christian-based cult group. So like I relate to a lot of these people. I always have. Like I've always had bad experiences with the church. So even when I first went off to college, like a lot of my friends were in atheist groups. And like we would go talk trash to each other, and then I'd listen to their bad experiences. A lot of them have a lot of church hurt. I'm like, yeah, man, I get it. Like being, as one of my close friends says, being human is hard. Like there's a lot of tough experiences. Like I listen to them, I affirm the pain, but I still try to deal with it as Christianity is still true. But I don't minimize what they're saying. If we immediately go to modern
No.
evidence, we're minimizing what they're saying. Like you don't
Well,
matter.
we don't have to. We don't have to go to modern
Yes,
because the Bible works in post as well.
it does. But if we just quote Bible verses, we're doing the same thing. We're just
Well, no.
hashing. Mhm.
The reason is because of how Jesus dealt with us. Because he took on the form of man, we have an advocate who has lived, who has a life experience, who knows the pain that people have gone through, who knows how it is to be hungry, who knows how it is to go without water, who goes without food. He knows how it is to be hurt by people. I mean, betrayal. Judas literally betrayed him to death. His best friend, one of his 12 closest friends, stabbed him metaphorically in the back and turned him over to be executed by his enemies.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're dealing with someone who has felt betrayal before and say,
yeah,
yeah, I understand that pain. And you know what? Who else understands that pain? Christ understands that pain
yeah.
because he had that happen to him as well. That betrayal, that stabbing in the back, that pain. Oh, I've been turned off by Christianity because a church authority came down on me. Maybe something somewhere. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about all the church pain, but I was rejected by the church authority, and that hurt me, and I was left abandoned because they had this concept in the Bible that I don't think is biblical, but man, it just hurt me. You know what? Who else was rejected by the religious authorities of his day but Christ?
Yeah. And
And
who? So
he's the one
then,
who wrote the book.
yeah, who's going
He
to
wrote the
understand their
book, and then
suffering?
they stabbed him in the back again.
Yeah, and like this is where I think you end up with interesting questions. Like, does what does Islam say about your suffering or your trauma? Does it matter? Can you make sense of it? Like, I don't have background in Islam. I'm assuming because it's pre-modern only, it's gonna have only bad
It's the
answers.
will of Allah.
Right,
It's the
right.
answer. It's the will of Allah. It's the pre answer. It's the will of Allah. We just don't question. It's just what Allah's doing.
Oh, okay. So like, I want to see how if I can give some more foundation here. Like when we talk about modern, we know, okay, science, history, we have these external sources that we can consider and then we can compare. For pre-modern, we know that we have these authorities that we can, see, are they consistent in themselves? And then how do they compare to the authority of the Bible? But what do we do with postmodernism? It's not just we ask and validate their pain. Ultimately, like I think a lot of these are identity questions where people are saying, am I lovable? Am I valuable? And so like, well,
I,
yeah,
I think the Bible answers that as far as how you're valuable. I mean, you're referred to as God refers to you as His masterpiece. I mean, that's not a small thing. You're his masterpiece. He loves you unconditionally, so much that he was willing to do anything just for the opportunity to get to know your story, to get to know you personally, and to participate in your story. That's what he wants. That's the relationship and the whole drive of Christianity in the end. It's just how do you put it in a way, and it would have to be, again, with post, it'll have to be individual, depending on what their pains are, what their issues, what they're dealing with. It has to be individual and meeting them where they are at. And luckily, we have a God that does that a lot of times. He meets us where we're at. And it's really crazy how that happens, but that's in the Holy Spirit movement section where we don't necessarily, as apologists, participate in, because that's the Holy Spirit's domain.
Yeah, and on here, I'm going to make a bold claim that I can't back yet, but I think that we can make a modern system to explain this. Like I have two rough systems in my head. Like the first one is I think that there are a couple of different areas like that people instantly think that naturally think that their value comes from. And I think that once you pair that up with the different parts of the gospel, you can understand, oh, this is why they have problem with sin. This is why they have problem with God existence. This is why they have problem with like judgment or hell. And I would say that those are like my value comes from my morality. If I'm good enough, my value to my, and this is a threefold question. My value to myself, my value to God or a higher power, and my value to others comes from me being moral enough. And like this is the one I most relate to. Like the next one would be my value before God, before myself and others is how helpful I am to other people. My value is how successful I am, how unique I am, how capable I am based upon how much knowledge I have, which I think a lot of apologists fall under. How loyal I am, like someone like Peter, like how exciting I am. I don't know how to summarize that one as much. How focused on justice and control I am, or like how much peace I bring, or how peaceful I am. These are the things that like make me valuable as a person. And my view on that is all of those things are a false identity in which when we try to live up to it, it is sin because we're saying this is the thing that justifies my value before God. And that's why I think it's sin. And so but all these things being subjective, I think that you can ask questions to pull that out. I also think that there are what John McCrae and I would call like the postmodern axioms, and this is something mostly he built up. Like if something is authentic, if something authentic is if I share something about how I actually feel, and that is authentic. Like things that are authentic are more true than things that are prepared. So a speech is going to be more true if it sounds like it's natural and they're saying it off the cuff as opposed to it being planned. Planned goes back under the modern, like, you know, category for me. Something is if it helps me understand my identity, like if it's for my personal growth and development. Like these are a lot of the underlying values that I think postmodern culture has. That if you reference them, then you can use that as a starting point in a subjective way within their own system to start going, oh, well, what do you do with these things that you think are both valuable to you, your feelings, but they conflict? It's emotional dissonance rather than cognitive dissonance. And once you're able to flesh that out, I think that you're able to talk about how the gospel is a solution, specifically for the subjective emotional part. And I think the Bible is also postmodern. Like going over Ecclesiastes, that is not modern. Like it's not. Going over a lot of the Psalms, it's like, oh, why, oh Lord, are you going to let me suffer for forever? That's not that is a how do I process suffering? Because a lot of the Bible talks about here are different emotional states that are hard. How do I work through them? And we're not like, well, we don't care that you feel like crap, David. Just trust God. That's not how that reads, right? So I actually think that the Bible can deal with all of these, not, but it deals with them all in their area. So the way that the Bible will answer the postmodern questions will not be in an authoritative way. Like a lot of postmodern stuff is about how do you have authentic connection. And so if when the Bible is talked about in a way that people can have authentic connection in a way that helps them understand themselves and resolve emotional internal problems, that's when it speaks to people. That's why I think, unfortunately, or better for worse, Jordan Peterson was such a good Christian apologist. Why? Because he spoke postmodernism to postmoderns so that they could better understand that the Bible is accessible. Oh, the Bible tells me something about like who I am or who I ought to be. It can make sense of me in this postmodern world where nothing is meaningful. Oh, okay, now I'll listen. Why? Because it was explained in a postmodern way.
Very interesting. Again, I understand what you're saying, and this is what
Mhm.
led me to have such an issue for a while.
Yeah.
Just need to dwell on it over and over again, because I understand what you're saying. It definitely makes sense with the world. There's definitely evidence that it makes sense with the world. That mindset's something I'm still dealing with as far as getting the perspective down, because
Yeah.
I have always been taught, and it's also biblical, that the heart is deceptive above all things. If it's just
Yes.
based upon
Yes.
feelings, it
Yes.
can very
What is
easily lead you astray.
yeah, is
And
that
what
Old Testament or New Testament?
that's Old Testament. That's
Okay, and what is the heart then?
Jeremiah 17:9.
Yeah, and
The
so
heart
in
is
Hebrew,
deceitful above all things.
what is the heart? Not in English,
Fe-
not in
What?
English. What is the heart in Hebrew? It's the
Not sure
seat of
which
the
one it was.
self. It is
This
your emotions and your intellect and your will. And so when we talk about it as emotions here, we are misunderstanding because we're understanding it from the English translation, not from the original Hebrew. And you guys can call me out if I'm wrong, chat. And so I would say when you're saying that, our mind is just as fallen as our feelings. Our mind is just as fallen as our feelings. It's not that one is more fallen than the other. Like, plenty of smart people that put facts together wrong. Plenty of smart people that do modern things that are wrong.
No, that's what actually that would be the second verse that I was going to
Oh,
pull
okay.
up. So you have that one that I definitely say would be based upon feelings. Now the Greeks had the concept of the feelings coming from the stomach, gut feeling. That's where we get the gut feeling from. That sort of concept. In Proverbs 3:5-6, it talks about trusting the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Now, again, this would be more the pre-modern concept. So you're submitting to God
Yeah.
and trusting that he will make your path straight. At the same time, it's saying, don't trust your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. So both of those would be issues, but it's not saying that that's the only one. Now, again, that's from Proverbs. That's from probably Solomon. It's
And what
probably
is
from Solomon, and it's words of wisdom. So these are general guidelines. This isn't like the order for everything. Just something to keep in mind.
yeah, and like what do you think Proverbs is? Like, is it pre-modern, modern, postmodern? Like I read a lot of it as like postmodern. Like it's not
You read
talking
it as
about objective
postmodern,
truth. It's not talking about like here's the objective financial understanding of how money works. It's hey,
well, it gives me something to test. So I mean, I could test, submit to him, and I could look at other people's lives who have done this, and does he make their paths straight? Okay, yes, they have in
yes,
history. Yes,
are you
okay,
testing it?
that could be
Okay,
tested.
interesting. Okay, I buy that then because you're saying you can historically test that. I agree.
But
And
I was just saying
yeah,
that as a lead up to, in general, though, I'd say that you're probably right with Proverbs being more post. And again, I guess that's one of the advantages of the Bible itself. It's 66 books. There's different authors, and it's written in different styles that will appeal to different aspects. For example, you got the history books. Well, I would take those history books and say, I can test these and make sure it lines up. Oh, well, we got the signet ring of Joseph. Okay, we got the signet ring of Joseph. That would line up with what we see biblically there. Okay, that lines up. We can also see times and places that are mentioned within the Bible, just offhanded mentions. Okay, do those line up? Okay, yes, historically, okay, those are tested. Again, there are sections in the Bible that are based upon what would be, like you're saying, postmodern, saying, okay, these are feelings based. This is their personal journey. This is their personal story.
mhm,
And you can even look at the Gospels as saying these are their personal journeys. These are what they experienced
yeah,
firsthand. And then you can look at the Gospels again through a different lens, from a modern lens, and saying, okay, they say these certain things. Are these test worthy? Can I test these? Okay, I can test these. And then you can look at it from the pre, which would be, are they authoritative? And the answer is, well, they're part of the Bible. They're part of the tradition of the church. If you believe in that being authoritative, then yes, these would be authoritative. So in all three of those, the gospel hits all three.
Yeah, and so like maybe we can bring out examples of how to what we can do with this then. So what actually people have been asking this. So what would a postmodern Muslim believe? Like if you read about moralistic therapeutic deism, it's a postmodern understanding of God that I would say is halfway between either Christianity and atheism or Islam and atheism. So you don't have no God, you have a God that's kind of there for your personal growth and development. If there's a Muslim version of this that's more postmodern,
They can't.
huh?
They can't.
No, well, so are you saying that those people don't exist, or that they are
No,
inconsistent?
they can't be Muslim and be that because of how Islam is set
Oh,
up.
can you have people
And
that
in fact, most
yeah,
Sunni, Shia, the 99% of the Ummah would reject them
yeah,
and say that they're just, they're just polytheists who are out there claiming the Muslim banner. Now, if we wanted to say, okay, those are, take them as Muslim themselves, and I would have to ask them about their theology. In fact, there is someone who gets on my channel which follows this, which really annoys Adam Seeker. Is Syed, I think it is his name, comes on every now and then.
who?
He's very, I would say, very post in a lot of his ways, but he's very Unitarian because he believes in multiple ways in order to get to God. You can be a Christian and get to God as long as you believe. And he takes some authority, but then can discard about everything from that authority and still claim that he's being consistent.
Yes, but if
Because
you
he
run
doesn't
into a Muslim,
feel that that's how it would work.
yeah. So if you run into somebody who claims that Islam is true because of their personal experience, what do you do?
That's hard to test because, again, I'm not able to disprove their personal experience because their personal experience is their personal experience.
Yes,
It's
but
something that has happened.
yeah, I would say you ask them for their story, and then you see, is it because it's authentically true to them? It solidifies their identity, like any of those values, or is it because it makes them feel valuable for being moral? It makes them feel valuable for helping others. It makes them feel successful. It makes them feel unique. It makes them feel competent through acquisition of knowledge. It makes them feel like they are loyal. Like if
In those cases, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but
yeah, no,
to
you're
answer
good.
your question, based upon what you just said, in those cases, I would have to go with, I think it's Greg Kokel's book, Tactics. I think it's his book. But the book's called Tactics, and it's how to drive conversations using questions.
Yep, there are two
And I'd
questions.
have to, with them, define, okay, is that where you get your value from? Is that, okay, you're getting your
Yep.
value from because you feel that you are helping more people out through your practice of Islam than through any other avenue. Okay, if I brought you something that has been historically more, that you could help more people out and has historically been shown to help more people out, would you be interested in that? And they could literally just say, no, I'm not interested in anything else. There could be something else that's the root. In that case, you would need to ask them what that is. You need to know them and know their perspective. And that's really where the post comes from. Unfortunately, we're really working against it because at the same time, a lot of post people are, yeah, thank you, Gregory. Cool. Thank you very much. Tactics. Yes. A fantastic book. Wonderful book. I
Really?
actually even handed some of those books out. I like the book.
He only has two questions. Like I think he's on the right start. like my claim is that it's like, what do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? Essentially, for
That's to
postmodern,
start it.
that's pretty much the entire book. Like the rest of it is about like what situations you can get into. My complaint is that it does not go far enough into how do you push the conversation forward in a postmodern culture.
Well,
Because you're
that's the issue, because again, it's individual. So it would have to be based upon the individual. And tell you truthfully, as a Christian, the way I would handle it is I would be, first of all, in constant prayer. Secondly, in the back of my mind, in constant prayer. Secondly, I would be relying completely upon the Holy Spirit the entire time, because I have no clue what I'm doing
yeah, and I'm
in that
here.
case.
You want me to tell you somebody who I think does a good job with this, and I don't totally know why?
Go
Your
ahead.
wife. Your wife. Your like your wife's setup is saying, okay, hey, I'm going to take your stuff seriously. But if you take your stuff seriously here, you're this big problem. You're talk fear. You're an apostate. And like what? And it's not just like, oh, therefore, you're like, here's the evidence you're wrong. Like with the way I read that, especially the way that she did it, I hear, oh, I'm sorry. This is your system. This feels terrible. Like let me help you have emotional resolution to this, and intellectual resolution, and authority resolution here. It's like why I really liked her setup, because I think like the way that is set up, it does all three things. Because I don't think most people's stuff does that very well. Because I think that it's I believe the way that Ella's explained it, it's a question that genuinely bothers Muslims, and she's taking it seriously, fleshing it out, and then trying to deal with like the consequences, including the emotions. And because I think if you do that, then you have more of a holistic approach, which is what I think a lot of people are saying. You have to have something for, it's not about pre-modern, modern, or postmodern. It's about reality. Yes, it's about all of these things. I'm only making the distinction insofar as we can better understand where people are coming from. Because like in my experience, like I sorry, El, I get frustrated with apologists here because like I hear people go, oh, I have this modern question. Okay, here's a pre-modern answer. And the modern person goes, oh, this person doesn't care about me. They don't take me seriously. Like essentially in this specific issue, when somebody goes, I am wrestling with like the universe being very old, you need to trust the authority that the universe is young. I think that is a mismatch and a poor communication. That's what I was thinking earlier. Like essentially, young Earth creationism, insofar as I understand it, is pre-modern. It's about, unless it's about the scientific evidence, and then we've moved it up here, and then we compare scientific models. And so I think like we have to be very careful that we understand what people are saying. Because like when things go pre-modern for me, I get uncomfortable because I'm not good at it. A lot of times I'll ask my friends for help. Like one of my friends deals a lot with like Black Hebrew Israelites. Oh, I'm like, okay, good. I'm not super useful here. Like this is one of those areas where John McCrae, like I saw him like doing street evangelism with David Wood, and one of the tribes recognized him and said, "Oh, you are a man with authority because you have a channel." And he listened to him because of that. I'm like, that's weird, because like for me, I'm not pre-modern. I don't care who John is. If he's wrong, I'll tell him he's wrong. Like but like understanding where people are coming from helps you tailor your answers to them, because we can oftentimes give people truth, but truth in such a way where we crush other people, and that's not helpful unless you can help rebuild them in the process. Oftentimes I think Christians answers to people in culture make them come away with the idea that they're not valued, that they are not listened to, and maybe even Christians or God hates them. Like that is unfortunately largely the message that postmodern people hear, because that's the story that I hear from postmoderns a lot of times. So
Very interesting. Again,
your wife's
wonderful.
funny.
I don't do that well. I don't do it well whenever it comes to postmodern, whenever it comes to the feeling, whenever it comes to that aspect of it. I do not do that well. I rely heavily on what the evidence actually is, and then finding out what you appeal to as your authority, and then going to that authority and taking that authority seriously. I think that's one of the reasons why my channel seems to work well with a lot of Muslims, first and second generation. Now, I don't know third generation if they are now more post in some of their concepts. But I guess that's where Elle can really shine, is she's got the ability to do it. I don't do the touchy feeling very good. I suck at that. My wife can tell you I am not very compassionate in that
Oh, okay.
regard, and it's one of my
Okay.
shortfalls.
Do you know? I'm guessing that that's not always true. I'm guessing that there are times where like, oh, my wife is struggling with this, and let me make an adjustment here. Where you're not going, well, here is the actual objective truth, or here's what the Bible says. You're like, oh, honey, yeah, this is hard. I'm sorry that you're having this kind of pain here. And so
Don't
I'm
ask you
hoping
those
that this is.
questions. Thank you very much. Don't ask you those questions. I played the fifth.
Because, and even with those, my view is that postmodern things can be understood in a modern way. And if that is the case, then we can have a system to better hear where they're coming from and better figure out how to communicate moving forward. So
No, I absolutely
yeah.
absolutely agree with you. In fact, like I was saying, if for pre and modern, and I didn't realize that you had this conversation, and I was too distracted by just having an issue with the postmodern, just being able to wrap my brain around that concept
Yeah.
originally, that I didn't even realize that you had an issue with like pre-modern.
Yeah.
Pre-modern seems pretty simple to me.
Oh, it doesn't.
You just go to their authorities.
Yeah,
Find out what their authorities are, and you have to ask questions to find that out.
So like here's my thing, man. This is gonna sound bad. Like when Wood took us all out in Dallas to go talk to the Black Hebrew Israelites, I just sat down and hung out with crap, I can't remember his name, but we just sat there. I'm like, okay, I'm an Asian guy. Like I know that intrinsic in this is like Black identity and like power dynamics. Like I'm an NPC here. Like John can speak here because he can speak with authority. Like I don't understand what the dynamics are, and I don't know why my voice doesn't count. And so like the way I understand the game to be set up, there's nothing I can do that will count as evidence. And so like there are a lot of situations in pre-moderns where I'm like, oh, I understand enough of these rules to know that I can't provide evidence.
And in that case, I don't really appeal to Black Hebrew Israelites because it doesn't work well with me necessarily. Now, again, for Muslims, being that I know what their authority is, I can go back to that. Now, I know in Black Hebrew Israelites, they sort of go to the Bible. They like yelling verses. I know that much.
Why?
They like yelling random verses.
Why?
And because they do believe that this is some sort of authority. I don't know how much of this they take as an authority.
Yeah, and
if they take the entire thing or only bits and pieces of it, because there's definitely bits and pieces that talk about not having racism. Racism is a bad concept within the Bible, that all men and women are created equal in front of God.
Yes, but quoting the Bible,
slavery is a bad thing, but that's something in their heaven, I know. So,
well, quoting verses is a power dynamic tool. This is what John and Carlton told me. They specifically memorize random verses or very infrequently quoted verses, and they quote them at you so that if you don't know the context, then you're like, oh man, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. And that is a power move. It's not a systematic argument move. It's just a move to show that I have more authority than you. Like I hate authority games like that. Like I never understand it. Like my default mode is modern. The only reason I've learned postmodern is because a lot of people I care about who aren't Christians speak that language. If I want to communicate the gospel to them, then I need to effectively speak their language so that they can understand what I'm saying, so that they can understand what the gospel even is.
So it's not so much that they are taking the gospel as authoritative. It is that they're taking the fact that they can just randomly throw out verses as a demonstration of their authority.
Yes.
Therefore, you need to listen to us as, one yells, read, and the other one just starts belting out a random Bible verse, hopefully that no one has any context to.
Right.
I can understand why they would do that.
Why?
I can understand that they want to establish their authority in order to validate anything else they say.
Yeah.
So they're using that as a platform in order to build off of.
Yeah, and in my mind, postmodern is way easier to deal with. Like pre-modern is its own like tribe, and I'm not in the tribe. And then like even that experience, read, and then the verse comes out. Okay, all you're telling me is I'm not part of your tribe, and your tribe's better than mine. Like, and I'm not invited.
In that case, you need to show that you know more. You're more of an authority than they are. And then that means that you need to be listened to more than they do. And again, that's the pre-mindset.
It is, but
In the
part of
same
what I
way, Islam really appeals to the Islamic scholars. In that case, the problem with the Black Hebrew Israelites is they're their own authority in the end. It's not like I can pull up this exact book here, this Black Hebrew, this, like I said, like the Quran, and say, okay, this is exactly it right here. This is what they're claiming is the authority. I can now study this and see if what they're claiming is true and put it to the test and then walk them through how to do it. A lot of times, definitely with Muslims, I will just ask the questions and put it into my stance whenever it comes to the praying to Muhammad one, which I've stopped quite a few on, and hopefully I've given them something interesting to think about. Is I will say, okay, if I were to come to you guys and say, okay, Muslims, stop praying to Allah, pray to me instead, and then I will go intercede with you with Allah. Well, then they're like, oh yeah, that's shirk. That's shirk. That's associating yourself with Allah. Okay, well, then I show that Muhammad did it. So I show that their authority did what they just claimed is a condemnable act. That being said, could do that with the Black Hebrew Israelites if I understood it a lot better, which I do not. I leave that to vocab to take care of.
okay, then
I
like
definitely don't specialize in it.
this is part of the part that I don't know what to do with Islam. Like part of it is being able to speak the native language. Oh, you don't really know this in what Aramaic. Oh, like a
It's
lot of
it's
it
a
is
it's a bluff. It's a bluff because 95% of them don't know it either.
yeah. Oh, again, it's a pre-modern power move. Like a lot of that. I don't. It seems like there's certain parts of the culture you already have to be in order to even have a standing because that's how tribes work.
Well, the advantage is that I have these nice little Qurans that are translated by Arabic speakers, by Muslim scholars who have the authority. So all I have to do is pick up one of those and say, you know what, who translated this was so and so, and he was on authority according to you. So I'm only saying what he's already been saying.
Okay,
So
that
I'm
makes
just
sense.
pointing to it, like going to Reliance of the Traveler is so powerful because it's the census of multiple Muslim scholars that
Gotcha.
all say that this is the way you need to live is exactly this way. So then they've already established that all their authorities tell them that this is good. So all I need to do is just say, okay, that's what they say.
How
Don't if you have a problem with it, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with them.
do, I would classify what you said as mostly modern because you're saying your scholars have said this. Am I wrong
Well,
there?
that's their authority.
But they're what
Their
makes them
scholars have written down it, and all I'm doing is pointing to it.
right? What makes those scholars right? Is it that they're educated or is that they're authorities?
Their
Like is it
authorities.
oh okay. So
It's supposed to be a mix between like they are the educated authorities,
okay.
but when it comes down to it, they're just
Okay.
authorities.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so that's pre-modern still. That makes sense.
And that's really powerful. Definitely, whenever you go to like Ali Dawa, who's supposed to be this like elite Muslim Dawaist who's doing this, and then you point to him and say, "Hey, he's the one who's saying that these are the scientific miracles that you guys are claiming are true in the Quran are all false. Why is that so? Why is your authority telling me that these are unreliable when you're telling me, being of a lesser authority, that they are reliable?"
Crap. Oh, I might have a question for Eric in the chat. So Black Hebrew Israelites, I think, is is a position that can give people that can give African Americans a better understanding of their own identity or value. And in that way, I think you can
That's
also
what it
talk
claims.
about. Okay.
I'd say that's what it claims. I don't think once you actually apply it, it actually comes out to be true because it's built off of faulty assumptions.
Right, but I would say I'm saying it's postmodern because it's not about it being true. It's about it giving a pattern or meaning and purpose to life where there was otherwise not seen any yet. Does that make sense? Because like in that way, I don't think truth matters.
That makes sense. I do want to keep this live stream to probably about 2 hours.
Okay.
So I'm probably going to have us wrap it up pretty soon. I do want to go to the poll though. And because I'm curious, because we had those 3 categories, which would fall into these 3 sort of concepts of post, pre, and modern concepts. And I would like to know where the audience really is on this. And I'm very interested in the result because it's actually kind of cool. So the question was, which of the following is most important, the most important thing to you in a discussion? So this is if we're having a conversation, you're paying attention to what we're saying. What is the most important thing to you? We have 0% say if it is from an authority. So if one of us is considered an authority and we just say XYZ is the way it is, that's not very impressive according to the audience. 0 say that that would be a good argument or authoritative in that way. We have 10% that said that it is how it makes us feel, how it makes me feel. So it's feelings based, so that would be post. So that'd be the postmodern concept. And 90% say the evidence you give. So the references, this is what the sources say, this is what, here's this other section of evidence that supports the original, my conclusion. That is the foundation of it.
I don't know what to do.
That is where the audience is. Go ahead.
I don't know what to do with that. I didn't expect that. I would expect at least some of your people to be pre. Well, why you have more postmodern than pre-moderns viewing?
You have more postmodern than pre-modern, at least in this live stream. Now, you might have invited people from your group. That might be the 10%. I don't know. Definitely the post. I don't see a lot of Muslims in the chat, so maybe that's coming from it. Again, those are just the people who voted on it.
Yeah.
So I do want to do another poll here on you guys because it's a question of what I should do this Saturday that I want to let run for a little bit while we're talking. The question is, should I do a deep review of the Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists conversation they had, debate? Should I do a deep dive into it? Where I know that David did a couple of them last night. I think IP did some of the things today. I didn't actually see what he covered, but I want you to know if I should do a deep dive into it or if I should just focus on what I currently have, which I think is if the criticism of Islam is justified or not. So I'm going to start that poll. So should I? So there we go. So let me know in the chat if that's something you think would be constructive, not constructive, and no just means it's been covered, it's not really worth covering anymore, or I actually would like to know more about it. It says, LOL, Eric, it depends on what you are looking for.
Eric from Russia, Christy, yeah. He asked if it's worth watching or not.
It's interesting. There are some points that are brought up. It's very interesting. I think that it shows Peterson's theological understanding of Christianity. I think it does show that. So, but I'll leave the rest if you guys want me to do a review on it. If not, it's all good. But I think that is where I'll leave that and let that run for a little bit. Joey,
Yeah.
is there anything else you want to add to this conversation? I mean, we could always do a part 2 of this if you don't think we've covered quite a bit, but I think we've covered in depth. And again, I find it very interesting that we're both can deal with the modern, but we have issues on the opposite ends. Issues understanding the opposite ends, I should say.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Because like, I
So
guess
maybe just here, maybe just need to do a YouTube channel, and then I pull all my postmodern people over to you because you can handle that. And any pre guys, you have come talk to me. There you go. That works. Okay. That's what it's called, the body of Christ. That's why we work great together, because you know what? I can't do it all myself. What doesn't work, what fails for me, I might fail at doing, Joey could fill in and he could do a great job at it. That's why marriage works, because men and women, guess what? Just to let you guys know, men and women aren't the same. Just in case you guys didn't realize it. Men and women are very different, but they work great together.
Al,
They
I
fill
think
in each other's
your
flaws.
husband's saying that I should be married to him. I'm very uncomfortable.
No. I'm very happy with my wife. So, but she needs to do more videos. And she needs to be able to have that time to do them. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've just getting myself in trouble at this point. I'm digging a hole.
No,
Which I cannot climb out of.
You can ask your wife about this. My weird interactions with other apologists all sound like marriage or something. As El has said about other apologists, they have to put a ring on it. Wait, what? And
I'm not saying it. It is Joey saying it. It's not my fault. Okay, I'm just saying. Just saying. And I'm pretty sure in the end, Joey might just be a little. And they changed everything around. Right here. He just might be a little.
We're proud of that, yeah?
Sorry, I had the clip. I had to use it. Well, the StreamYard changed everything around on me last second when I came in here. Keep doing this. Keep updating. So if there's any questions in the chat, make sure to at us. We'll let you know. Joey, do you have a channel? Eric wants to know because I think you might have a fan.
Joey does not have a channel yet. Don't know if I will. Like, this is something that I want to explore further so that we can come up with other methodologies on how to have good conversations with people that aren't modern or pre-modern. I don't know what format that'll take. Like, if I did a YouTube channel, it'd probably be going over cultural events and just translating what they're saying. And eventually giving the tools like the postmodern tools. How do you break down where they think they get their value? What are the postmodern values? How does this impact what they hear about God's existence? Man is sinful, all of the different parts of the gospel. And then we can say, based upon this, this is what they hear. This is how you resolve it.
Okay, well, you know what? In the chat, let me know yes or no if you think Joey should start his own channel sometime in the future. This could even be considered a snippet of it, because that's what we've been talking about the entire time, is how to have a conversation effectively.
Oh, it looks like there's a person in chat who I talked about who had a bunch of great postmodern conversations. Maybe we'll let her have a channel.
Which one's that one?
Tony C.
Maybe she should do a channel with you. There you go. There's your conversation right there. Boom, done. Signed, sealed, delivered, finished. So now, since she said, I don't know, she didn't say yes, that you should have a channel. I should probably wait until she said yes. Because if you think they should have a channel, now you're obligated to help him have a channel. I win. Ooh. See? I can think through occasionally. So, thank you guys so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. Joey, I know that even though you don't have a channel, there are some opportunities that are coming up for people to hear more from you. I know we could have you back on the channel if there's anything else I think comes up that could fit your, I guess, expertise. I will definitely invite you back on for that. Again, after our conversation, I was like, this definitely needs to be recorded and put on YouTube because, again, I don't know what I don't know. And these concepts, I didn't have. I didn't get the concepts. I understood that people were driven by emotion and valued emotion over other aspects, but I didn't have it broken down like this, which definitely helped me start thinking about how best to handle those in the future. So, and I'm hoping that might have been helpful to some of you guys out there. But there's another opportunity later on this year for you to speak at. Which one's that one?
Which one's what one?
For people to hear you speak at.
Oh yeah,
Coming up in a
going to
couple
be
months.
speaking at a conference that a couple of my good friends are putting on. It's in Youngstown, Ohio, from July 31st to August 4th at some church.
Steel Valley Church. Yes, that will be our Seek and Share Truth conference coming up. And yes, Joey will be one of the speakers there. If you guys have deep questions from this, you guys take notes. You guys can go ask him all those questions about how to deal with postmodernism. And don't ask me because I will look at you and say, get over it. Which won't be an effective apologetics. Just let you know that is not effective. That's an effective way of getting punched. So I'm not encouraging you guys to go out there and get punched. But I just want to let you know. Now, coming up this weekend, let me find out what's coming up this weekend. We do have 8 votes out of the time period that we have saying, yes, I should definitely do a review on it. So I'll probably push off the topic to another time and do a reaction deep dive into it. I know that's an hour. It's an hour and a half long. So that will be a long live stream this weekend that we will be doing. Joey, if you would like to join for that, let me know. But I know that that's a lot of time that you'll be dedicating into it. And I'll see about getting some other people on the panel in order to give their impressions on what happened with the Jordan Peterson verse 22 atheists. It's not really a debate. It's like a conversation, shotgun conversation thing. It's almost like speed dating, right? They got the flags that they can put up and say, oh, you're done. You're done. And you got a little timer there, right? So Jordan Peterson.
Why does your husband think everything's either
atheists.
flirting or speed dating or marriage? Why?
Because everything is relationship based, obviously. And if you're talking about emotions with relationship, what's the best one? And what's the highest emotional relationship you can have with someone? It would be dating, engagement, marriage. That would be the highest sort of emotion where you get the highest emotions, but still have that relationship aspect of it. The good, the bad, the ugly, all together, all in one. So
Tony wants to know if we're on a date right now. This is the worst speed date ever. It's just super slow.
It's the worst speed date. It is almost 2 hours long. But like I said, I wanted to keep it to 2 hours. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I do have an outro talking about the Islamic dilemma for you guys to enjoy. And I'll see you guys back here on Saturday. And then next week, I should be talking about the Seek and Share Truth Conference and what is coming up for us. So until then, Dias Volt.